Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming back today. It is really an honor to be here, and it's an honor and also a huge, tremendous responsibility to be doing this work. So I'm here, every time I come here, I am reminded about the importance of equitable development. So last month, when we released our report, I was reminded by my cab driver coming from the airport. He's a transport here from New York City. And he talked to me, I was telling him about our work, and he talked to me about the feeling in the Black community around development and feeling afraid of being displaced. And that was an important reality check. And then just last night, talking with a practitioner working in Homewood on community development, he was talking about how development here is so political. And putting forth this definition of equitable development and the strategy is a political act, and it's about community power. And so that is very important to set out. So we are so excited to be talking with you today about what we learned. I'm going to talk about our report, how we developed it, the process behind it, and what we found. And that is really to set you up for the conversations after the break about how to help us implement these recommendations and move forward. So first about the process. This really began at the last P4 conference, where after Angela gave her talk, Presley and Bill Generett from Urban Innovation 21 found her and said, we really need PolicyLink to come here and to help us develop a strategy for equitable development. And with the support of the Heinz Endowments, we were able to engage in this process, as Presley said, engaging 200 some, many of you, hopefully in the audience, in the process of developing this definition, a shared definition of equitable development, and an agenda to move forward toward action. And that process included coming here to do a series of interviews. I'm going to talk about the findings from those interviews with key leaders, about 20 interviews we did, and then doing a series of interactive workshops to come up with a definition and an action strategy, the beginning of an action strategy. And also, I just wanted to say that there was a large delegation from Pittsburgh that came to the Equity Summit of 2,000 people in Los Angeles in October of last year. Could the folks from the delegation wave their hands? Yeah, right? So you're sprinkled throughout the audience, and they've been with us the whole time. So to talk about the interviews, the key themes that came out, I'm not going to touch on all of these. I just want to touch on 3. Everyone that we spoke to talked about the struggle of institutional and structural and individual racism, which we began the day with yesterday. It came out throughout the conversations, but we heard it over and over and again that this is really the key challenge to equitable growth and equitable development. The second key theme was really fragmentation. Pittsburgh has 90 neighborhoods, and people are organized around their neighborhoods, and there's a real hunger and desire for a regional and citywide approach that goes across neighborhoods, that unites people around a vision for the future, but yet is tailored to neighborhoods. And the third key theme that I wanted to share is around accountability. People talked about how there are a lot of policies that get put in place here, but there's not always monitoring, enforcement, and follow-through, that there really needs to be a focus on accountability. So those interviews informed us about what we needed to be thinking about as we developed an action agenda. But before we got there, we held a workshop to create a shared definition of equitable development, which you see here on the screen, and I'm going to go ahead and read it to you. But there were about 100 people that came together at the Kingsley Association and helped us to create this definition, something that we can all gather around, rally around, something that we want to see adopted by policymakers at the city level, at the county level, and we hope that you can use this in your work. So here it is. Equitable development is a positive development strategy to ensure everyone participates in and benefits from our region's economic transformation, especially the low-income residents, communities of color, immigrants, and others at risk of being left behind. It requires an intentional focus on eliminating racial inequities and barriers and making accountable and catalytic investments to ensure that lower wealth residents, one, live in healthy, safe, opportunity-rich neighborhoods that reflect their culture and are not displaced from them. Two, connect to economic and ownership opportunities. And three, have voice and influence in the decisions that shape their neighborhoods. So that is the definition that we put forth. And then we developed a strategy, an action agenda for making this the reality. And the action agenda covers these 5 components. I'm going to share a little bit about each of them. In your app, you have a link to the report so you can read more there. And you also have a one-pager. You should all have a one-pager at your table that summarizes the recommendations. So the first one is around raising the bar for new development. We knew this is about equitable development. We have to focus on the development that is happening, the new market rate development that is coming to Pittsburgh after many, many years, decades of paving the way for development and struggling to revitalize neighborhoods. Development is coming. How do we leverage that? And so part of that is about shifting strategies when needed. Pittsburgh has 90 neighborhoods. Development looks different in all of those neighborhoods. The key to equitable development is understanding when the market is shifting and when you need to shift from revitalization strategies that are building markets, bringing in opportunities, trying to stimulate market activity, to shifting to guiding the market, ensuring people aren't displaced, implementing policies. So this section has recommendations on that. And so it recommends the P4 metrics, which are a wonderful start. It's really innovative what you're doing here. And they are not enough. You also need policy to guide development. And so the policies that are needed are around inclusionary housing. Inclusionary zoning is something that you are ready for. You need to figure out the strategy, but you're ready for it. Also around local hiring with first source centers that connect people in neighborhoods to the jobs that are being created on development projects. And then around contracting with opportunities for businesses, developers that are people of color, women, et cetera, people who are developers who are generally locked out of the process. And also another policy is long-term affordability. So over and over again in cities, we see that they build affordable homes, and then as the neighborhoods improve, they lose their affordability. So you really need to lock in that affordability, especially in opportunity neighborhoods, so that you can maintain that and have integrated neighborhoods. So also in this section is a focus on enforcement and monitoring, which is critical. The next action area is around neighborhoods. This is a very broad action area, but to frame it, I would say that the goal here is really to increase the number and share of low-income residents in the region, in the city, that are living in high-opportunity neighborhoods. We know that neighborhoods affect your access to opportunity, your health, your ability to thrive and participate. We need to ensure that more people live in healthy neighborhoods, so that means anti-displacement strategies to ensure that people can stay in their neighborhoods as they're improving, as Angela mentioned yesterday. Also, it means building affordability into neighborhoods that are already thriving, that have transit access, that have access to healthy food and grocery stores that are already thriving. And then the third is around building affordability. And then the third is, more affordability throughout neighborhoods. Making opportunity investments in neighborhoods that are still distressed. So these recommendations are around neighborhoods, and then another strategy that we highlight is around building community ownership and power through a community land trust approach. There are budding efforts here around a community land trust in Lawrenceville. I just heard about another effort last night, and we need to amplify those efforts and think about a citywide or regional community land trust approach. And then 2 other strategies in this broad section that I wanted to mention are around community schools anchors of communities, and then investing in arts and culture in changing neighborhoods, which Janera Solomon, who will be on our panel, will talk about more. But what we see in communities that are gentrifying is that if you invest in resident-owned arts and culture, resident-driven arts and culture, that can anchor those communities and maintain neighborhood identity. The next area of action is around economic opportunity. So we must recognize that development creates economic opportunities, but most people are working in other sectors of the economy, and we need to open up those sectors. We also need to ensure that those jobs are good jobs. And so the efforts here around economic justice are very vibrant and growing and expanding, and those are really important. And also we can think about other strategies around economic opportunity and inclusion, like the city has an inclusive innovation roadmap. And we've seen, and that is a great starting point, and we've seen in other places, like Portland, for example, they have integrated race-conscious strategies into their inclusive innovation strategies, and they are seeing results. So in Portland, they have a startup PDX fund, which funds new startups. And over the past 2 years, 60% of those founders have been Black and Latino. Because they took a race-conscious approach, they reached out to communities of color and shared the opportunities, and they had a target. So I think that embracing these race-targeted approaches race-conscious approaches will be productive in Pittsburgh as well. Also, one of the key themes from our interviews was that Pittsburgh is blessed with many strong anchor institutions. They are the drivers of your economic transformation. And in other communities, anchors are doing more to collaborate and to direct their purchasing power and their economic weight to inclusion. So if you look at Chicago and what the anchors are doing there, if you look at Cleveland and what the anchors are doing there, those are models that Pittsburgh can look to, and the anchors can do much more. We know that things are happening and there's more that can happen there. The fourth area of action is focusing on institutions and how government and businesses can embed racial equity throughout their operations. So this might sound far-fetched, but this is happening in other places. And so you see here an example of it in Fairfax County, where we did an equitable growth profile. They recently adopted a One Fairfax resolution to embed equity throughout their policymaking and decision-making. There's a national network called the Government Alliance on Racial Equity. Pittsburgh can join that network, get support for training throughout its government entities and agencies, and move forward with adopting a racial equity and equity lens throughout its decision-making. The business community, we've also seen efforts throughout the country in terms of businesses really embracing this approach. We know here that the Allegheny Conference is promoting the Rooney Rule. That's terrific. That's a great start. And there's more that can be done as well. There are metrics that businesses can adopt to look at their practices, thinking about how do you embed within corporations, firms, the building blocks of the economy, an equity approach. And Sustainable Pittsburgh here and Idea Foundry, they are coming up with metric systems that your businesses can adopt to understand how they're doing on inclusion and do better. And there are examples of companies that have done this. So Cascade Engineering is a wonderful example in Grand Rapids, Michigan, of a company that has embraced anti-racism at its core. It has a mission statement, and it's focusing its hiring on people who have been on welfare and who have been formerly incarcerated, and they are thriving because of it. So it is, as Presley said, a bottom line strategy. It's not just about charity. And they are now leaders in the community and trying to get other corporations to adopt similar practices. So a lot to learn from. The last and critical strategy and action area is around community power, voice, and capacity. This is a broad agenda. It doesn't even touch on everything that needs to happen, and it needs leadership. And it needs leadership from multiple sectors. It needs leadership from the organizers, from the people working in government agencies, from the community development community. And so we want to move forward with developing that coalition for change and investing in it, and making dollars available, capital available for innovative strategies. And so that's a critical last strategy. Moving toward implementation. Today is our next step to share these strategies with you, get your feedback. We are working, PolicyLink, Urban Innovation 21, and Neighborhood Allies are working to prioritize among these action steps, what should we do now? What should we be working on in the coming year? And then we are also working on what is the structure for that collective action that is necessary. And as we're working on that, today's session will be helping us to develop those priorities. We will be reconvening those who are engaged. We will get you contact information so you can become a part of the core group and sharing those priorities with you. And so to be all in, we all need to be engaged. So I thank you for being a part of it and look forward to the discussion.